Let's talk about now the island of Ireland. The former Irish Prime Minister Bertie Ahern joins me now from Dublin. And a very good evening to you, Mr Ahern. And the way things stand now, in terms of what you hear or indeed don't hear from Downing Street, do you feel the reintroduction of a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic is a distinct possibility?
Well, I think it's too early in the negotiations, Dermot. Tomorrow I'll be with the House of Lords. They've put a lot of effort into looking at the UK-Irish dimension of this whole problem, and I think we appreciate the amount of effort they've put into that. I find it very hard to see if immigration is the big issue, how the border issue can fall out in the negotiations and just what precisely will happen. But I think there is a united view around the island of Ireland, north and south, across all political streams, that people want to see a border as close to what it is at the present, where there's total free movement, where there's not custom control, and where people can move between Dublin and Belfast minutes that it takes. And of course, the perception and the memory of the past is all the difficulties that the border created, and nobody wants to go down that. On the other side of it, I do see the dilemma that the British Prime Minister finds herself in. The land border of Europe is now between Northern Ireland and the South. If immigration is the huge issue, how can you allow that to just be there without any controls? And I think this is going to be a very difficult position in the negotiations. And in the Good Friday Agreement negotiations, of course, there were many references of how the institutions in the north and between the north and the south, between the south and Westminster would operate. And all the references were about us being in Europe together and cooperating together and working within the European Union to deal with the difficulties. Of course, in a few years, that's not going to be the case anymore. So it makes a lot of problems and leads to a lot of difficulties.
And what are your concerns, Mr Ahern, for the Irish economy? If the UK leaves the European Union, leaves the single market and has to operate under World Trade Organization rules or something like that, that could have a devastating effect, couldn't it, on Irish exports?
Yes, it will, I think. 14% of our trade goes to the United Kingdom, but that figure isn't really the one to look at. It's over of our indigenous companies that employ about 85% of the people. Over 40% of the trade goes. We are still a huge agricultural country, along with being an ICT and pharmaceuticals. But on the agricultural side, over 50% of our beef, 60% of our cheese, 84% of our poultry goes into the UK market. So tourism be too affected, but sterling has a huge impact on an enormous amount of our businesses in the hospitality areas, in the food areas, in the beverages area. So the consequences for the Irish economy are many, they're difficult, and it's no good anybody saying that it's not a major worry for us.
And what are your thoughts, Mr Ahern, on much longer term, given that Northern Ireland voted to remain in the European Union? And, some kind of parallels here with Scotland. We know Mr Sturgeon is talking about a second Scottish independence referendum. Does this in any way, and I mean much further down the line, bring the reunification of Ireland a bit closer together, or some kind of federal Ireland to keep Northern Ireland within the EU?
Well, I think maybe down the road a long way, maybe that would come around, but it'll only be done by the basis of consent and persuasion. I think in the short and more immediate term, I do believe we have to find a way of working with the United Kingdom, of trying to deal with the issues, not just at a European level. I hold the view that since the Good Friday Agreement and St Andrews Agreements were international agreements, and they were predicated on the Republic of Ireland and the UK continuing on as EU members into the foreseeable future. We have to find some basis of agreement among and between ourselves, as well as what happens in the wider group of 27. And I think that's going to be a real challenge for our government here. I think obviously we're going to have to use the North-South Ministerial Council and the British-Irish Council, which are part of the Good Friday Agreement, to try to make our case and articulate our case on that. And, you know, down the road, perhaps people will see that the island of Ireland all being one would be a good thing, but I think we're talking, Dermot, a long way into the future before we get to that. The next few years of negotiations are going to be hugely important of what happens on the border, what happens free movement of people, and what happens economic-wise.
Great talking to you, Mr. Ahern. Thanks for sparing the time. Bertie Ahern there, the former Prime Minister Taoiseach of Ireland there on Ireland's Brexit concerns. And this is Sky News Tonight.